Hello and welcome to our webinar. My name is Carolyn Margiotti. I'm a board member for the CFA Society San Francisco. I'm pleased to be here today to discuss what recruiters are seeing in the financial services job market in 2026. My background has been in financial services as an asset allocator, as well as other areas like relationship management and most recently as an investment strategist. I'd like to first thank you for taking the time in your day to join us. And I'd also like to thank and welcome our panel speakers. We have Jeffrey Abram, who is Senior Vice President of Permanent Placement in the Financial Services Group at Robert Half, and Monica Minetti, who is a Recruiting Associate at Apollo Global Management. A couple quick notes before we start. Everyone will be, besides us, will be muted for the event. So we encourage you to type any questions in the Q&A box. We will attempt to answer as many as we can after the panel discussion. We'll also record the event so we can share the replay. Before we start the discussion, it would be great, Monica and Jeffrey, if you could please tell our listeners what your role is and a little bit about what you cover at your firms. Perhaps, Monica, you'd like to start?
Yes. Hi, all. I cover global wealth here at Apollo within the North America area. I touch our four large offices, so Miami, California, New York, and Connecticut. Most of my hiring is done, I would say, in the fundraising space. So I hire a lot of our externals. I hire national accounts teams, our marketing teams, internals, externals. So although I strictly cover wealth, I touch a few of the areas that work closely with them, as in product management, institutional sales as well. And before Apollo, I was at Morgan Stanley, where I touched fixed income and investment banking recruiting.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I have been with Robert Half for 11 years now, and I lead our financial services group. I personally cover the Bay Area market, and we are the largest financial services team within Robert Half, although we have teams in New York and Boston and Chicago as well that are dedicated just to this industry. Out here, much of the client base that I cover is going to be your asset managers, your alts managers, and private wealth, anywhere from retail wealth management up through family office. We do service, of course, lenders and fintechs and other forms of financial services organizations, but I'd say our lion's share is in the alt space and the private wealth space, ranging from roles from analyst through VP and sometimes C-suite.
Great, thank you both. Thanks for your time today. So let's get started. As anyone on the call knows, the job market really broadly has changed significantly over the last 5, 6, 7 years for lots of reasons. First, due to the pandemic, which changed not only what we do and how we do it, but maybe where we do it. And then more recently, due to the growth in AI, or artificial intelligence, and its use. Today, we hope to learn more about opportunities in finance and investment management and what recruiters are seeing across the profession. And to start off, I think it's difficult to address the job market without first talking about the elephant in the room, which is AI. So I know you'll both touch on this in more detail, but perhaps to start at a high level, can you tell us just a few thoughts on what you're seeing and hearing given the AI boom and some of its changes to the job market? Jeffrey, maybe start with you.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely at the forefront of everybody's minds, and it's creeping in more and more on open recs that we're working on filling. Clients or hiring managers are often looking for those individuals that have demonstrated use cases of gaining leverage via AI tools. And more so than just a question answer usage of these tools. So I would say that it's wise to put those tools that you're using or any use cases that you've succeeded with actually in your resume, or be prepared to talk about those in detail in any conversations you have on the interview path. Even if it's not something you read in the job description, it is absolutely on everybody's mind and they want to hear about it.
I agree with that, Jeff. I think it's something that everyone should at least touch upon. I don't know if on our specific end, we don't always bring it up in interviews, but I think it's something that is expected in conversation that you at least are, knowledgeable in some sense. I also think to some extent it's allowed us to be a little bit more thoughtful on where we're hiring, how we're hiring. Um, but I think it's like Carolyn, you said, it's at top of everyone's mind.
Hmm.
Right. Thank you. And so following up on that, what I've heard a lot about is skills. That there's a focus on skills, and people I know that are looking for jobs or having trouble finding jobs are saying they say, "Oh well, there are jobs. It's just we need the skills and we can't find the skills." That kind of thing. So, is that your experience? What are employers? What have they changed their focus at all? What do they focus on? And relatedly, what are the skills they might be looking for, or what are the things they're looking at?
Well, I think even with skills, I mean, this is an absolute, but to the prior question about AI is helping to also bridge the gap in skills that you may or may not have. So if you're pursuing a job that maybe a few years ago you wouldn't have the skills for, perhaps you can speak to how you've accumulated those or are using some tools to close that gap, particularly for maybe earlier career individuals. Um, but I mean, skill set match is still paramount, at least when it comes to recruiting from my perspective. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to understanding what is the scope of a role or what are the keys that a hiring party is really looking for to be able to match yourself or speak to that gap.
And Monica?
I agree. I think it's being just more thoughtful in your seat. I think a lot of times AI, like as a company, people are fearful of their jobs and, they think that there's not going to be space. I think we've kept all of our jobs. Like we are still actively hiring. I think it's just using AI to better help the skills in your seat, opposed to using AI as your job.
Mm.
Got it. I think those are some great points. And I think speaking to using AI as a bridge is fascinating to me. And so along those lines, when you think about AI and tech literacy,
Hmm.
um, it, are there specific qualifications that you're seeing either your company or others are looking for and requiring of candidates that maybe they weren't in the past?
Go with Monica for
I was
follow-up.
going to say, I think Claude is required at my company. Everyone needs to be using Claude. It's become a mandate to make sure you're in it to some extent. Um, the amount of times I'm in Claude in comparison to someone who works in tech in my company is obviously very different. But I think across the board, whether it just be, the company having conversations on bringing on AI or a company like myself that is really enforcing Claude and really encouraging every candidate to be using it. Um, it's really dependent on the seat though. Like I think to my extent of when it comes to candidates that I have conversations with, I think just bringing up the idea of if they've been in Claude before, if they've used AI, how they're incorporating it present day. But I can't speak too much on tech literacy of it, unfortunately.
Mhm. Well, requiring Claude,
Yeah,
that's a great
that's
that's a
yeah.
great tip that
And
people need to
I
know.
know we're a very one-off company to do. I think it's a great thing that we are, but I think a lot of companies are just starting to, you know, incorporate it as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so switching from very sort of hard coded things
Hmm.
to other types of skills, you read about the more human skills being
Yep.
more important.
Mhm.
I'm not sure all of what they are, but sort of I think talking about good decision making and adaptability and things like that. Do you have you seen much of that, or do people are the companies talking about that, or your company talking about that? Maybe Monica, if you want to
Yeah.
start.
I think, I mean, I have the privilege of covering global wealth, which is all personality. I think it's a lot of sales and it's a lot of you know, front facing, where I think a lot of jobs nowadays you could be behind a screen. Um, I would say I've always looked for this in candidates. Like I'm a very big believer in having an initial round in person and seeing people's, the way they present themselves and their confidence and like empathy. All those matter. I think if anything nowadays it matters more, especially because, example, Claude AI. There's a lot of tools that people could use behind the screens where you stand out in a room if you have a great presence to you, if you have those personality traits as well.
Mhm. I was talking to my my wife before this a little bit because she's deep into using AI. She works for Meta, and they're like forced to use it for basically everything now. And she was saying the new coding language is now English.
Yeah.
How well you can actually prompt the tools to return what you need. And so, it's that communication skill, almost soft skill, to really get further that she's noticing in her day to day.
Right. You have to phrase it correctly to get to
Yeah.
get the response you're looking
Yeah,
for.
but you're collaborating with other teams or stakeholders or whatnot, and you need to understand very well what you're putting in to get the right results back out.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So let's move off of AI a little bit. You guys are great. Although there'll be some related questions. So thinking about job search for those that are looking to make a change or that might have been laid off. And let's talk a little bit about applying for jobs and the follow-up. Um, uh, and you hear a lot about just you see online. Hundreds of people have applied to a job, in an hour or two. You'll see 100 or 200 postings. And I've seen jobs recently that are so complicated in the requirements that I don't know anybody that could do that job. And then I look and there's, 100 people have applied. And I just think
Um,
there's no way there's 100 people that are, completely qualified for this. So so maybe first, just where do you suggest folks looking? Is it LinkedIn? Are there different job sites? I mean, the CFA Society San Francisco has a job board, which I would definitely recommend to folks in our industry. But LinkedIn has certainly come up as to, I think, a very uh, somewhat reliable source of postings. Um, and so sort of where should people look? How should they think about the postings and as a use of their time and
oh,
applications there?
yeah. Well,
Jeffrey?
it's a great question. I know it can be disheartening when there's 100+ applicants,
Hmm.
and how do you get noticed? At least from my perspective, I post ads all the time. Maybe 10% at best of those 100, if there's 100, are really worth responding to or fit criteria. So there's a lot of flooding of job postings with applicants that don't shouldn't really be applying to those jobs. So I wouldn't let that number of applicants deter you from still expressing an interest and trying. I also always say you miss all the shots you don't take, so it's still worth taking the shot. But I would highly encourage an individual to post applying, look into the firm more, look into see if there's any common connections, look into try to find who the hiring party of that team may be, kind of send a note or a cover letter, if you will, humanize yourself a bit more, match your skills or match your fit from what you read a little bit more. Now, that all takes extra work and time, totally understand that. But if it's a job that you feel really is a good fit, for you and you have the skill set for, um, well, my observation is that there's not that many that are such a good fit. So if you feel it's a really good fit, give it the extra time it deserves.
Yep. I agree. I think LinkedIn um, is very big. I think you could find a lot of seats there, but I think LinkedIn and applying to a job is just the first step. Jeff's point. I think the way you stand out in front of a recruiter is whether it be a connection through someone who went to the same college as you as that company. Me personally, when people send me a note, and Jeff, I'm assuming the same with you, we get a ton of emails a day when it comes to candidates, but if someone ever sends me a note regarding the college I went to and they're junior, I'll always respond to them. I think doing the research on your own and getting in front of someone within the business goes a very, very long way.
Yeah.
But, yeah, folks that I talked to most recently have said, it's a tight job market and some won't apply to anything that they don't have a contact at the company that they can reach out to. So, I don't know if it's quite that bad, but, it does sound like, the hit rate is obviously much lower if you don't know somebody. So speaking about LinkedIn, how important is LinkedIn? How should people think about it? Does their resume have to be completely on LinkedIn, every single thing, or should they use it in a different way? For recruiters, is it kind of that's where you start, and that's if you're not on there, then you're going to lose out? Or how should people think about LinkedIn, their presence there, and what they need to do? Maybe Monica, if we start with
Yeah,
you.
I think that is your complete brand. Like LinkedIn should be completely updated. I know me personally, anytime I get an application, anytime I put someone through a first round, LinkedIn is the first place I'm looking, right next to their resume. I think it's such a great place for you to really sell yourself. You could see, what this person's following, the interactions they're having with, different companies, what their interests are. Um, you should always have a professional or somewhat professional headshot as your picture. I think it does go a very long way, and that's a good, easy step to get in front of a recruiter.
Hmm. So I would second that. Um, but also from where I sit, I part of my value add is tapping into the passive candidate world. And some of those people may not have updated their LinkedIn for a decade, right? And so it's an interesting candidate to also come across or be referred to as someone that doesn't have a big online presence, that isn't so active out there. So, but I would agree with Monica that is a pretty good rule of thumb is to have your virtual profile. It should match your resume. You don't want there to be any differences. Um, Again, to second what she's saying, it allows you to also add things about yourself, interests you're following, common connections, etc. So it is great, but not everybody wants to have a social media profile, and that's to be respected as well.
Hmm.
So.
Great, thank you. And then back to sort of the point about how to make yourself stand out. Any additional tips there? And do you think maybe this would be a good one for you, Monica, that for folks that are trying to get into like alternatives and don't have, there's some areas in alternatives,
Hmm.
especially that are very difficult to break into. Um, do you look at certifications? Do you look at, the CFA Institute has different certificates. I know they have private equity. I
Yep.
think they have a 1 and a 2. Um,
Yep.
but is that looked at as okay? They're kind of they got up to speed on
Yep.
this area specifically, and then obviously the CFA charter. So how do you guys think of all that?
I think for sure it makes a big standout. Every single person I hire within my coverage has to have their SIE 7 and 63. That said, at a junior level, we will bring someone on and give them the experience to study and, prep them. But from my view, if you're serious about an industry, or you're serious about a certain coverage, you should at least take the time to understand the exams that are needed. I'm not saying it needs to be completed while interviewing, but I think that's expected to at least, do the extra mile of educating yourself there, because it does make a difference if someone comes in with 3 exams opposed to, studying for a year while they're sitting indoor.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely back that up. It's a demonstrated interest, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
Having not just done the basic research to know what's required to be eligible for a certain certification, the time frame, the expense, how you're
Hmm.
going to accommodate that while working if you're going to be doing both at the same time. It's all showing that you're diligent.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. So switching a bit to the resume side of it, which you touched on a little bit, obviously use of AI has increased in resume writing. Perhaps it's even required at this point. looking for keywords, et cetera, that helps match it to the posting or the qualifications. But then people also wonder about getting through some of the applicant screening systems, all of that. How can should people be using AI to write or improve their resume, and how much should they use it? Because I think there's
Yeah.
kind of an overuse, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Mhm.
Maybe start with Jeffrey.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a challenge that a lot of clients of ours are faced with is how to validate the skill set match as well, because these resumes are now so fitting perhaps to the job. So the interview process needs to be a tad more rigorous, and I'm seeing 70% of our recs have a case study these days to validate skill set match. Versus, let's say 5 years ago, that would have been 40 or 50%. So by all means, you can leverage the tools at our disposal to increase your work product or to improve your work product, but be prepared in your interviews to really speak to those points that are there. Should have always done that before, but now just expect hiring managers to really press on that more.
Yep, I agree. I think it's a great tool that we're able to use, and it's a good way to clean up your resume, but I don't think you should rely on it in the sense of if you're interviewing, you're unsure of what your resume is actually saying. Use it to a certain extent, is my opinion.
Got it. And just generally, not necessarily for your roles or whatever, or you can speak to that if you want, but the applicant tracking systems and all that, the screening processes that I think are out there that many companies use. Is that how prevalent is that? Is it really screening people out really quickly? What should people know about those and how to kind of maneuver around them?
Um, I don't have a terrific answer around that. The majority of my clients are small to mid-sized companies for the most part. So the resume screening review is me and the hiring manager, or some people there. The applicant tracking systems that I work with is like, Greenhouse and Workday and things of that sort. And those systems aren't kicking any candidates out that I've put in there. So I don't have a great answer for the larger employers out there and how that's working. Perhaps Monica, you've got some insight
Yeah,
into
I was
what was standing before.
in-house. I'm the one going in and looking at every single resume. I don't believe in using AI to, automatically take someone out because AI is not perfect. It could pull something that someone's doing 3 years ago, and if you really look at their resume, they're doing something different. So I think everyone deserves to have a chance to at least have their resume reviewed. And then I do the initial screen and, figure out if it's worth showing to the business. But I think that may be different when it comes to large banks. Like if you're touching um, seats that are getting, I know at Morgan Stanley, I was getting like 1,500 applicants for certain roles based off of friends I have in the industry. They are incorporating AI because it's just not, you're not able to go through it as a person.
Yeah. Someone I was just talking to last week, this as a small example, was a fintech AI company, and they had a compliance role posted. They got 648 applicants for this position. So, and they're an AI company. So I can only imagine that they're going to use some tool to sift through that enormous pool of candidates,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Right. So shifting a bit, but sort of going into the interview process, but also thinking about resumes and how people are applying. This actually came in on the Q&A box. What would you suggest for job seekers who are having trouble getting interviews, even though their background and their resume match the role that they're applying to? Any thoughts on that from either of you?
Mhm.
I would say back to the LinkedIn point, I am the biggest believer in your network. I think going the extra mile, even if you are reaching out and it's going to feel annoying to 5+ people at a company, there are so many times when I have partners send me an email of an outbound, like an inbound from LinkedIn. They have no idea who this person is. and this person wrote like a well thought out email about the company, brought in some points about, what they like about the company, what their team's doing,
Yeah.
it goes a long way. Um, I really think like just using your network any way you can, that is what makes you stand out. If you can get a referral, if you could just get in front of someone, usually, you know, people will try to help out best as possible. It's a frustrating task. I know what it's like to apply and it takes a while. But I really do think you need to go that extra mile nowadays.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the members here wrote a question, if not on social media by choice, um, what's a search strategy for tenured professionals who are not on LinkedIn? And yeah, a lot of members here might be research folks, and you're basically conducting your own market research for employment instead of investment opportunity. And so you want to try and find other like-kind firms that are in your area that, employ a similar strategy that you have experience with, and you sort of triangulate it from there. And to Monica's point, do some outreach. Um, Beyond that, it's leveraging the common connections, of course. But I think depending what you do, um, showing the research that you've done on your own behalf is impressive if you're applying for roles that you're going to be doing market analysis on.
Right. Great. And so relatedly on thinking about the interviews, you've touched on a few things, but just what's some general advice or tips that you would give candidates to best prepare for their interviews, and maybe some things to avoid in their doing in their interviews, some pitfalls you've seen.
Hmm.
I think having a story about yourself should be like you should have a pitch about yourself completely locked down. I think one, it gives you a good sense to sell yourself outside of a resume. Almost every interviewer will ask you, tell me about yourself. I think from there, knowledge on the company. Me personally, I ask every person who comes to the store, why do you want to work for Apollo? What do you like about Apollo? You should at least know some names, some products we're involved in. I think that goes a long way. You'd be surprised if people who get on a phone and don't know anything about the company they're applying to. Um, I also think just being yourself. I love to see a personality in an interview, and I think it is your time to really, to my first point, sell yourself. Um, with Chat GPT and like AI and all these other tools that we have nowadays, that really is your way to get in front of people and sell your story.
I would also include, being positive about all of your prior experiences, how it's built you up to be ready for this experience you're looking to gain. Um, Preparing thoughtful questions is always super important. That sounds a little general, but really the more genuine your questions are and the more thought-provoking they are, that allows you to stand out and be remembered after the interview. A follow-up thank you note is something that
Mm,
seems to have gone to the wayside, but
always.
really carries weight. It's also your closing comments, if you will, and the last thing they'll remember from your interview with them. It shows the care, the extra, step you're willing to take, highlights interest. Also, leave no doubt on the table that you are in fact interested in what you've heard and and that you are interested in the job. Can't tell you how often I've gotten the feedback that candidate, they're not sure if they're actually interested in the job. And then I talk to the candidate afterwards, they're like, no, I would really love the job, but they didn't do a good enough job highlighting that in the conversation. They kind of kept themselves a little too reserved, or, were being a little almost too polite, just waiting for them to ask questions of the candidate instead of really leaning in more with that enthusiasm for the opportunity. So there's a whole art form to it, I guess, and it can be studied and it can be practiced. It's not just a natural thing that everybody has. It's by no means natural. It's hard. We don't do it all the time.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
And a lot of the people that are the best candidates aren't the best. salespeople, really, than
100%.
of
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, so then one other piece of feedback or advice there is a lot of people don't like selling themselves or talking about or giving themselves the pats on the back in the interview. So come prepared with comments that you've gotten on your reviews or from your manager or from a client, something that's third party that describes you without you have feeling like you have to describe yourself.
Great idea. And continuing on that, sort of thinking about the communications in the interview process. Um, uh, and you've stressed, I think, the importance of that and importance of a thank you note and following up on all of that. Are there any red flags or things you've seen that you think that's probably not a great idea, maybe to avoid?
I would say, Jeff, you touched on this. Speaking negatively about your past job to me is a red flag. I think even if, you know, you didn't like your seat, you didn't like your manager, you're at the stage you're at for a reason. You're at the great new job you're at for a reason. So I'm a big believer in always spinning it in a positive light. Um, I would also say speaking too much about yourself. Like I think sometimes it's good to have a conversation and of course, you want to sell yourself, but you also want the interviewer to be able to speak as well. So I think trying to, and it's silly, but when I first started interviewing, I practiced with a friend. I practiced with my family, like having the conversation. I think those are probably the two biggest points. But I would say probably more so speaking negatively about your past jobs is top.
Right. Got
Yeah.
it. And then given AI, given the use of technology on really all sides of the equation, if you think about the hiring process, has it I heard some things that make it sound like maybe it's shorter because they've got these screening processes or whatever. And then some say though it's taken longer because people are being asked to make presentations or do, project work or whatever. And do you have a sense that the hiring process has changed just as far as the timeline over the last several years, or is it kind of the same? What should people expect?
So my answer on that, and then on Monica, because a lot of interviews, at least the first half of the process, is still a lot of times done virtually. It can feel like multiple rounds of interviews, 4 or 5 or 6 versus 2 or 3, but that's because it's spread out over these different, Zoom calls. So the first 3 calls can be Zooms, and that can take you 2 weeks to get through those 3 calls before you might do a case study or be invited in for the first of probably 2 on-site, visits. So it does seem a bit lengthened compared to, and I've, again, been doing this 11 years, definitely lengthened compared to pre-COVID era
Hmm.
interview process, right? But the candidate a lot of times is somewhat okay with that because they don't have to take a whole half day off right away at the start of a process. They're almost able to juggle like working and interviewing a little bit more these days than perhaps in the past.
Hmm. I
Did
would,
I answer the question there, or
no,
Monica?
I would agree with you. I think that there's still, like, I don't think they've gotten shorter. I think us as a company and at my past role and friends I have in the industry, they're still relatively long. But to Jeff's point, I think they're not all in one day. So they seem extremely long, but it's really you're meeting the same amount of people just over time.
I am encouraging of our clients though that have an overly lengthy process to consolidate it. Um, a good recruiting process has momentum. It's tight and it's focused. And if you don't find your candidate in that window, okay, then you can keep looking. But a drawn out process really doesn't benefit anybody. You increase
Hmm.
your chance of losing the candidate interest wanes. Just, it just doesn't improve the recruiting experience on either side.
Right. I'm going to switch to a few of the questions coming in because they're mirroring some of my questions. Uh, just in general, how would you describe the current hiring landscape in financial services? Is it turning into a tighter market with less openings, or is there still a strong demand for talent?
Mhm. I would say that there's still a pretty good demand for talent. I would say that those that are hiring, though, that as we've discussed here, are keeping a pretty high bar in terms of who they want to consider and who they're going to pull the trigger on. But I do still see a healthy demand, and the first, 5 months of the year thus far, from our perspective, have been really good, actually. So knock on wood, that continues the rest of the year. But demand is definitely up from what I can see in the Bay Area, but also from what my colleagues across the financial services overall practice have been telling me. In the Bay Area, though, wealth management is kind of the hottest area that I've seen.
I
Is
agree. I think it's still, we're still busy. I think the only difference now is my company and a few others are really trying to build their presence outside of the main hubs. We consider our main hub to be New York. For instance, we're hiring more so in California, Miami. I think there still is a need, but we're being a little bit more strategic on how we're hiring.
Great. Thank you. And I know this depends on your role, but question about what are some of the in-demand roles that you're seeing currently? I think when you read about AI, I've seen a lot about compliance. I've been seeing a lot about just regular analysts. There's still a lot of demand for those roles. What are you seeing as far as the roles that are still being, there's a lot of positions for?
hmm You want to start, Monica?
Yeah, it's hard because mine, I'm specific with my industry, but
Right.
I'm still seeing a lot of junior seats. I think a lot of people, when the whole AI thing came out, it was a big push on, are we still going to hire analysts? Are we still going to hire associates? I've probably been my most busiest in my junior hiring. Um, us as a firm are still always looking for great sales members. Um, I would say more so maybe people skill type roles like wealth in my instance has been very busy. Credit across the board I think is still a world that's extremely busy. Um, but I would say junior seats are actually a bigger push now, although it's you would think the opposite.
Yeah. In the
Right.
wealth management side, I would actually second that. I was looking at some of our placement history the last 12 months. There's like in sort of the advisory vein, there were 12 hires, 10 of which were 5 years and under, junior hires.
Mm.
Um, there's still a big demand for more senior level hires, but there's in advisory, but there's really less turn going on at that space. A lot of demand, less options. So firms in private wealth are trying to funnel new talent in and up to compensate for that. So that's on that side. In the alternative investment space, I don't do too much on the investment, team side too much, but there has been a trend, a growing trend for like portfolio monitoring, performance, sort of strategic finance. So non-investment team member, but still a heavy finance role within venture shops, private equity shops, um, multi-strat managers and the likes for an internal finance person or team of internal finance people. Um, a lot of these management companies are really looking inwards and saying, "Hey, how are we actually performing as an operating company?" And they're not happy with what they're seeing. So there's been a big push to elevate their operations, and so there's hiring needs there. Compliance is an area that we're seeing demand as well. With of course, again, the AI rollouts and the risks it poses to traditional or fintech organizations are huge. And so people are frantically trying to keep up with that. Chief risk officers, chief compliance officers, CFOs, um, really putting a lot of emphasis there.
Great, thank you. That's all very helpful. So you hit in there, you hit a lot on quite a bit on entry level and assuring that that's not going away, that there's still jobs there. We have actually several questions had come in about, is AI replacing entry level financial analysts? Where's the trend? Um, the transforming of the workforce by AI, what does that mean for those that are just starting in industry? So let's switch a little bit to sort of mid-career, and there's been a lot of questions on the sort of advanced career candidates, those with more experience. How should candidates, advanced career candidates, consider, what should they consider in the roles maybe they seek, or how do they present themselves? And one person specifically said, can there be too many years of experience that work against a candidate? And how should they present that?
Yeah. Uh, it's a really good question, and it's something that we battle all the time because there is sort of an issue with, not an issue, there's a hesitation by a lot of parties out there to hire somebody either overexperienced or perceived overexperienced for a role. They might the risk or concern is that the person will grow bored in the position too quickly or not be truly willing to do the lower level work that may be in that position. So that leveling match, it really is something that people take into account heavily.
Mhm.
There's also just a misconception that junior talent sort of learns faster, moves faster, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't believe that to be true at all. But how do you overcome that? I would say, back to sort of highlighting the most current, tech and trends, and that you are up to snuff on some of that stuff, and you can compete against whomever when it comes to the day-to-day on it. And then lastly, the story needs to make sense. Why would somebody that's this level be applying for this level? How does that shift or pivot make sense for them? And how does it make sense for the company? Like, put yourself in the other party's shoes. How does that make sense for them? And why should they pick that person over somebody that's a closer fit?
Yep.
What's the
Great.
ROI? You know?
Right. Thank you. Monica?
I was going to say, I think job descriptions are written for a reason. I think looking at the year's experience, what's, expected, um, we do sort of hold our standard there. I think to Jeff's point, having a story, like if you are looking to make a pivot and you've worked in the industry for 10 years and you're looking to move into a different career path, I think there needs to be a good story. Um, Otherwise, to a recruiter's lens, it's sort of like a college kid coming out of school and looking to apply to a role with 5 years experience. You just don't have the correct background. So I think one, either, educating yourself in a way to qualify for that seat or having a good story in which you want to, work towards those qualifications.
Hmm.
Let me switch, coming up almost about on time here. I think we've gone through most of the questions. Uh, Slightly different topic about onboarding and making,
Mm-hmm.
positive first impressions as you get into a new job, which is also, of course, very important. How do you as recruiters and employers evaluate a candidate's fit and impact as they start their initial onboarding period? And how can new employees start off strong?
I think holding the same standard that you did when you were in the interview process, people hired you for a reason. You should still respond that way to the business, to the recruiter you're working with. I think being thoughtful, maybe, reaching out, having coffee chats, or setting up meetings ahead of sitting indoor goes a long way. But I really think just continuing the cycle that you were doing during the interview process. People think sometimes onboarding isn't as important. I think onboarding is like your true first um, review before stepping in the door.
Hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so that's onboarding the sort of administratively,
Hmm.
not necessarily even the first month or two, but once you're through the door and you've got your desk and so forth, um, go around and introduce yourself, but also, don't be too much, right? Be mindful of people's time and how long you're chatting them up and
I
stuff.
am
But
new. I'm new.
I am new, and this is what I'm doing here, and would love to find some time to connect with you whenever suits you, right? So just make your presence known, be graceful, and yeah, be, professional. I've had some instances where people came in guns a-blazing too high, and they were really different than they were in the interview process.
Hmm.
And things did go south sometimes. Doesn't happen much, but it can happen. So, you're new on the block. You behave that way.
Yeah, I think those are great suggestions. I know in the past I've been not wanting to bother people, and then
Mhm.
you find that they're kind of offended that you haven't like gone in because you know they're the big whatever, and so then you find out
Yeah.
they actually do want you to come around and say hello, and making connections like that are always useful. So,
Mhm.
so seeing no other questions in our Q&A box, I'd like to thank you all again for joining us this afternoon, and I'd also like to thank, of course, Monica and Jeffrey for sharing their expertise today with us. And with that, thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank
Ellen.
you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.